On your CDs, which I love, you talk about no karma. There's no such thing as karma.
Well, everyone who uses a label means something different by it. And if by karma you mean you are an eternal being, then we agree with that. It's just that a lot of people, when they use the word, are really looking at it from an entirely different vantage point than is ours. So we will not say there is not karma, because the way some people are looking at it, we are in agreement with. But what do you mean when you say karma?
Well, I'm in complete agreement with you.
Whatever it is.
Whatever, because I don't care. I think it's totally lame.
But
and an excuse to kind of, not be happy.
If by karma you mean, before I was in this body, I was source energy, and I achieved a vibration of such well-being that I extended that well-being here, and law of attraction responds to what I've got going on. Sometimes people are speaking of karma, like what goes around comes around,
right.
And law of attraction
karma
is a way of talking about that.
Right.
But a lot of people say, when things are not going well in this moment of their physical life experience, it's karmic. I must have done something bad in a past life, and I'm paying for it now.
Right.
And we are in utter disagreement with that, because everything that they're living now is in response to the vibration that they've got going now. And further, what you call the death experience, we lovingly refer to it to the croaking experience. That is the recycling into the vortex and renewing all that you know. In other words, it's sort of like the death experience is the vortex taking you in, and the birth experience is the vortex spitting you out. It's not quite like that, but sort of, because from the non-physical, you are pure positive energy, and then you were born to a mother who's been worrying about you for 9 months. And here you are, and now she's usually really worried about you. And so it's not as vortex-like what you were born into than the energy from which you have come.
So if you're thinking that karma is real, and that it's like if I do something bad today, tomorrow something bad is going to happen to me, and you're in this physical life, is that going to happen?
Well, you get what you expect, but here's the thing. There are two aspects of you that are offering vibration all of the time. And the source energy part of you is holding steady to the fullness of all that you have become. So you have to get rather resistant about something over a pretty extended period of time in order to trample the good karma. Mm-hmm. Now, we used karma because we want you to not push against the idea of it.
Right.
In other words, you really have to do some consistent, resistant thinking in order to disallow who you really are.
Gotcha. Okay.
Expectation. You said you get what you attract, which is almost like saying you attract what you attract, which is just fine because it's a fine way of saying it. But here's a way of saying it that really speaks to everything that you've been saying and we've been saying, and that is you get what you expect. And an expectation is just a pattern of thought. A belief is just a thought you keep thinking. And if you keep thinking it long enough, then you develop this pattern of expectation, and then you begin manifesting, and then you prove yourself right.
Right.
In the beginning, Esther would say to us, as we were coaxing her from some of her patterns of thought that were not serving her, and she would say, but Abraham, it's true. And we would say, that's not a good criteria. There are a lot of things that are true that you don't want to attract into your experience. So rather than using the criteria, is it true? Because there are plenty of things you don't want to experience that are. Why not use the criteria, does it feel good when I contemplate it? Because if it feels good when you contemplate it, that means the larger part of you is contemplating it. And therefore it is a solution or an answer that you've been looking for. But if it doesn't feel good when you contemplate it, nothing about it could serve you. Let it go.
Okay.
When you understand that the universe is responding to your vibration, so what's manifesting is an indicator of what you've got going on, then it's helpful to pay attention to what's going on and to acknowledge that I am the creator of it, regardless of whether it pleases you or doesn't please you. What happens to a lot of people, and the reason that things like a sort of screwy version of karma, or all kinds of screwy versions of what man calls God, or of what man refers to as heaven, or life before this, or life after this. There are so many really distorted beliefs that man is holding. But the primary reason for almost all of those is that when you stand in a place living something that doesn't make sense to you, then you try to fashion a story to explain it. In other words, if you've been taught that these are the rules, and that if you keep these rules, you will thrive. So you keep those rules, you try to do it as best you can to the letter of the law, but you don't thrive. Then your questioning mind says, what am I missing? And if your logic says, well, wait, you can't be missing anything, because when you were little, they said, go to church, and you did. And the church said, do these things, and you did. And the church says, don't do those things, and you didn't. So in your way of thinking, you've done everything right, and yet you're still not thriving. Then a sort of logic takes over, and you say, there must be more to this. I must have done something at a time that I don't remember, and I'm still paying for that. Now, that's sort of logical, isn't it, under those conditions? Or what about someone who has been taught that if you keep these rules, you'll thrive, and if you break them, you won't, and you break them? Then you're in a place of expecting negative compensation for having broken the rules, and when it comes, it confirms your negative, and from our point of view, irrational belief that you are being punished for breaking a rule. When you're not being punished for breaking a rule, you're getting what you expected. You see, you're getting what you practiced the vibration of. So no one can even begin to make sense of their own life experience until they understand that they are source energy in a physical body, but that while they're in this physical body, the source energy part still exists. And if you can make yourself understand that these two powerful, vibrating aspects of you are always having a relationship with one another, and your dominant intent is about this relationship between you and you, now you've got it figured out. Now you can dovetail with karma, or whatever you want to call it. You can dovetail with the whole of who you are. It makes sense in a karmic sense. It makes sense in a religious sense. It makes sense in a non-religious sense. It makes sense in a scientific sense. It makes sense in a physics sense. In other words, the laws of the universe make sense. And when you find a way that you can make them work for you, now you've got control of your experience, and now you've got a joyful life experience, and now you're fulfilling your reason for being, because it's all about joy and expansion, and now it's all working for you, you see. And then it doesn't bother you when other people talk about karma in a screwy way. It doesn't bother you when other people talk about religion in a screwy way, or drugs in a screwy way, or politics in a screwy way. Because the fact of the matter is, there's so many people talking about so many things, and almost none of them see it just like you do. So if you're looking for satisfaction by finding a group who agrees with you, then you're looking for love in all the wrong places, because they're fickle. They might agree today, but they won't tomorrow. You see, you've got no consistency to your guidance. But when you get hold of your emotions, and you know what they mean, and you care about how you feel, and so you deliberately and consistently guide yourself into alignment with who you really are, then your life just works for you. No matter what the subject is, or no matter what aspect of your life you're focused upon.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting that you would say that, because when I was younger, I broke all the rules, all the laws, did all the drugs, and everything went my way. I mean, literally, everything went my way.
Because, Mother,
seriously,
you had the good fortune of not being made to believe in the wrongness of your behavior. So you didn't split your own energy. In other words, if you can make your children feel guilty, you've managed to separate them from who they are. If you can make your children feel guilty, you've managed to separate them from who they are.
Right.
Because you cannot make their inner being feel guilty. If you could make their inner being feel guilty, they wouldn't feel guilty because they'd be residing with their inner being. And guilt is feeling some way different than their inner being feels. Oh, that was really good.
Really good. But they tried to make me feel guilty. I mean, I was brought up really in a religious family, and all that stuff was bad, and I just wouldn't let them. I really, absolutely, under no circumstance.
So as we hear you here, rather than a sort of defiance about their wrong-headedness and what they were trying to get you to believe, what your inner being feels is appreciation, because they did the best they knew how to do. Mm-hmm. And through the process, you just sent more rockets into your vortex, gave yourself much more opportunity to expand, and when you came into alignment, you were a whole lot better for it.
And look where I am now. Right? Sitting here in front of you.
We say that to everyone. Where you are is a byproduct of what you have lived. And that is the best reason of all to appreciate everything that happened, because it has led to this powerful point of understanding. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
So how do I get in the vortex? I mean, how do I get there?
How do you get in the vortex depends on where you are when you ask the question. Because if you are really in a negative place, in other words, if you're feeling powerlessness, the direction of the vortex is revenge and anger, and the doorway to the vortex is an emotion of hope. Mm-hmm. But sometimes you're not even in the vicinity of hope. So the path to the vortex is a path that's laced with relief after relief after relief after relief. So when you say, how do I get in the vortex? How would you characterize your mood, attitude, emotional state of being when you ask the question? In other words, where do you think you are on the emotional scale as you ask that question?
Kind of high right now.
Well,
sorry, Mom.
Well, then your question was screwy.
No, but I mean, like,
and your question should have been, how do I stay in the vortex?
Oh, right.
But that wasn't what you said.
Well, that's because I formulated the question a few hours ago when I was driving here in traffic, in construction, listening to you spew off these processes that sounded so beautiful and happy while everybody was driving 4 miles an hour, and I thought, I'm never going to get the seat right in front. But then I thought to myself, wait a minute, I always get that parking spot right in front. So I just kind of lined up with the parking spot in the room in front.
So that's how you get in the vortex. That's exactly the process. You take what you're dealing with, you acknowledge that you're not where you want to be, and in this case you took it a little further. You acknowledged that you weren't where you wanted to be vibrationally, and then you imagined the negative repercussions of that, of not getting in the front row or whatever you were shooting for.
Right.
But then you sort of came to your senses and began building your own bridges to the vortex. In other words, you built your own bridge to feeling better. You said, even though traffic's not moving, and even though there's construction, I always get a good parking place. I can pull parking places off whenever I want, and all this is a parking place for my physical body. I can get a parking place for my physical body. And then you sort of had fun with the humorous analogy that you'd carved out for yourself, and then you were in the vortex. That's exactly what the process is. You just find a pathway to it. You see why we're so excited about you figuring out the importance of the vortex? And just like you brilliantly figured out how to bridge yourself into a seat, that's what we're talking about. That's how you get into the vortex. First, you make it important, and we think we have rung your bells about that. And next, you accept that everything so far that life has helped you carve out is there for you, right down to the last detail. And then you just do your simple thing. Dance your way in, massage your way in, eat your way in. Don't really recommend drugs, but it is a way in.